Welcome back. In today's Focus, we're bringing you a rare insight into Burma ahead of the upcoming election. After Sunday's poll, the military regime says it will hand over power to a civilian government. But critics say the election is just democratic window dressing and that the junta will maintain a tight grip. At the same time, there are warnings that mounting ethnic tensions could come to overshadow the vote. Around a third of Burma's population is made up of ethnic minority groups, and some of them control large areas of land, especially near the border to Thailand and China. Some of these groups are or used to be aligned with the government, but as Burma's main opposition is pushing them to boycott the upcoming election, the junta is seen to be growing increasingly nervous. A team from France24 entered Burma in secret to cover the story, and they filed this report.
The Burmese border, late October. The country that for half a century has lived under dictatorship is bracing for elections. The first in 20 years. Terrestrial borders have been closed for 2 months, officially and for security reasons. To enter the country, we must travel secretly, by foot and with the help of guides, into the Thai-Burmese jungle. We are in southern Burma, in Karen State, a region disputed for decades by ethnic guerrillas and the government's army, whose troops have mobilized in great numbers during recent weeks. After hours of walking, a pagoda, finally the first homes.
We'll walk through Wale village and try to meet the rebel leader. We must hide, be discreet. If not, we won't get to see him and won't be able to come back to Thailand.
But where are we now?
We're arriving in Yepo village.
As we cross the village, there are no adults, only children left to themselves. Their parents are busy. They are preparing for war. Teachers have fled their schools for fear of imminent combat.
The Burmese soldiers are just over there, not far into the mountains. Ours, they are over there.
And here they are. A unit of guerrillas have come to fetch us. We continue our journey by local means. These are members of the DKBA, a pro-government militia that, like many ethnics, has allied with the dictatorship for 15 years. They live from trafficking and are feared along the border. But the elections have changed the game. The Burmese seek to disarm them and to reduce their autonomy. The situation has turned explosive. The first signs appear in this hamlet. There are too many Burmese soldiers. Our guides must find a way to safely escort us across enemy lines.
There are too many Burmese soldiers here. We cannot go through.
We will take another way.
It's the end of a long day. Finally, we arrive in the bastion of the warlord who invited us. We're 200 kilometers from Rangoon, a big village with electricity, a brand new Buddha, symbols of wealth for the region. Trafficking in all of its aspects is profitable. We finally meet Nakamwe, the man who just declared war on the Burmese military, his former allies.
There is no longer any ceasefire or peace. All the ethnic minorities will ally, and we will overcome the military dictatorship that betrayed us. We need the West to support us. Foreigners must condemn what is happening in Burma.
We've been fighting for generations. We will win this battle.
Will you go all the way with Nakamwe?
Yes, to the death if necessary.
These collaborators of the Burmese regime have switched alliances. Even the monks, long silent in the face of repression, are voicing their opposition.
All these monks were thrown into jail. It's terrible and cruel. Monks simply sought to show their love and compassion for the Burmese, all Burmese. And look how they were treated like criminals.
Like Nakamwe's men, a dozen ethnic rebel groups have threatened to take up arms. Thousands of well-armed men could thrust the region into bloodshed.
For more now, we turn to Mark Farminer, who's with us from London today. He's from the group Burma Campaign UK, which is pushing for the respect of human rights and democracy in Burma. Thank you very much for speaking to us, first of all. Do you think there is a real risk of violence erupting in connection with the election, and that there could be clashes between Burmese troops and these militant groups?
Yes, there is a very real danger. I visited Karen State, where you've shown the films there, but further north in Shan State and further north again in Kachin State. And there are rebel armies, many of them thousands strong. Many of them have been on ceasefire now for almost 20 years, but because they are being forced by the regime to become a border guard force under the control of the Burmese army, but without being given any of the kind of political autonomy or respect or rights for their culture, they are resisting this. The deadline passed in September for them to agree to become part of the Burmese army and hand over power. And the regime is threatening that it's going to use military force to take over these ethnic areas that have traditionally been controlled by these different armed ethnic groups.
But why do you think this problem is coming to the fore now in connection with the election? Is there a link between the two?
Very much so. These elections for the regime are all about securing their power. It's about giving them legitimacy, and they want to crush all opposition as part of that. So they've instituted a new constitution designed to maintain control, and in that constitution it says there can only be one army, the Burmese army. They've rejected all the calls from the democracy movement for any kind of autonomy or federalism. What we have in Burma is one of the most ethnically diverse countries in the world. Burma as a nation was never traditionally, these people were never together except brought together under British colonial rule. And then since the independence of Burma, these ethnic people have been fighting for independence. Now they're willing to compromise and stay part of Burma as a federal Burma. But these are very different people, very different cultures and traditions that have been pushed together in Burma. The armed ethnic groups there, they're willing to be part of Burma now, but they want some kind of rights and protection, because for many centuries they were oppressed in the past by Burmese kings. They've been attacked militarily, facing horrific human rights abuses under the dictatorship that's currently in power. So they want some kind of guarantee that they can protect their people, protect human rights, and keep their culture and their traditions alive. This constitution doesn't allow any of that to happen. So these armed groups that have been on ceasefire, they don't want to fight, but they are saying, if it comes to it, we are forced to, because the alternative, as they see it, is the end of their people. It will be the end of their nation, the end of their culture.
Now, the main opposition group in Burma, which is led by the Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi, they're calling on these minority groups to boycott the election. For them, though, is that really the best way to go about this? Won't they be even more excluded from the political process and from the political scene in Burma?
I think the problem is that people are talking about the parliament that's going to be created as some kind of opportunity, but this is a purely rubber stamp parliament. What happens after the election is a new council is formed, dominated by military people. It's called the National Defence and Security Council, and they will be running the country. The parliament will have no real power at all. Apart from the fact that the elections are a total sham, there's been no opportunities for any free or fair campaigning. In many ethnic areas, the elections have been banned completely. So you haven't got people in ethnic areas, probably up to 2 million people in ethnic areas will not be able to vote at all.
Mr. Farminer, just very briefly, some people say, though, it's a step in the right direction. You don't seem to agree with that at all.
Well, it's a step in the wrong direction, because this is not anything to do with democracy. This is about the dictatorship maintaining its control. So these elections are about them securing power. In the past, in 1990, when there were elections, they were not free and fair elections in the run-up, but there was free and fair counting on the day. And the National League for Democracy, led by Aung San Suu Kyi, won 82% of the seats in Parliament. The dictatorship was not expecting that. They genuinely thought that they had rigged the process enough. This time, they're not going to make the same mistake. This time, they are making sure that every single aspect of these elections is secured to make sure that the result that they want, their sponsored political parties, are going to win the election. They've guaranteed that they've got 25% of seats for soldiers in the parliament. Right. And in any case, they've brought in this new constitution which guarantees that they have a veto over anything that the parliament does in any case. So it's actually not going to take us any closer to democracy in Burma at all.
All right, and Mark Farminer with us from London today. Thanks very much indeed. And with that, we're going to have to wrap it up. Focus. Stay with us.